So I see that Mr. CJ, who swore that he was cooking everybody, in particular his own people, finally got that nigga wake up call. It is glorious to see. When y'all realize that the fat meat is greasy and the chickens have come home to roost, don't come trying to look for us. You insufferable black leftists such as CJ and Khalil and the
Liberal
many
content
others.
creators getting paid $8,000 a month to spread Western imperialist propaganda, and he made a calculated business decision.
I'm joking. There's no way that he's getting paid, but I do think we should start calling liberals propagandized socialists.
The newest season of online leftist brain rot has just dropped. And remember last season when Madeline Pendleton said that the CJ character was like the smartest character in the universe, and if anybody ever disagreed with them, they were the ones that were wrong, and if CJ ever corrected you, you should just rethink life. Do you remember that? And then remember towards the end of the season, they had that weird thing with Christian Divine where they started calling him a dirty...
CJ, my nigga CJ. Oh, man. All right, look. I know I am the last motherfucker you want to hear from right now, okay? And I know I'm being petty. I know. I'm a few days late, but I'm getting videos scrolling across my For You page calling you a lib. Crazy. I know you're not a lib. You know you're not a lib, all right? I know you know that. And we don't see eye to eye on everything, but nigga, I've been there.
Hey, my name is CJ, and I'm here to put a pause on all of that bullshit that y'all just heard. My apologies for not putting a jump scare warning before the start of the video. I'm mostly making this video because I've been seeing a lot of videos across my timeline on my For You page, and since this is really relatively the end of all of the China, Burkina Faso, and DRC discourse that I kicked off around 2 weeks ago, I was just perplexed and shocked that so many people were quick to jump and call me a liberal, which is insane because I've been the main nigga cooking liberals on that app. But I think that this conversation is a part of a larger conversation in which a lot of quote unquote self-proclaimed leftists build cult of personalities around political figures, politicians, and foreign diplomats that they view as anti-West or anti-imperialist. These quote-unquote leftists only like the aesthetics of socialism and only like the aesthetics of communism because these people do not look at the actual policies that these people are putting forth and the material harm that these political figures are causing. Without further ado, we'll start with the centering of this whole conversation, which starts within the Democratic Republic of Congo, or the DRC, which is the extraction site for the whole entire world, or whether it being the East or the West. We can see many of the things and many of the commodities that we have today just would not be possible if we did not have this violent system of enslavement and extraction going on within the DRC that is facilitated by both East and Western powers. The thought of the rise of the East and the dominance of China and the dominance of Eastern hegemony may be advantageous to some because they may view this as a better option than the historic examples of colonial violence and extrapolation and extraction that we've seen from not just the United States, but Europe and wider society as a whole when it comes to Africa. What I urge us as socialists, Marxists, anarchists, or anybody under the umbrella of the quote-unquote left, what I urge you all to do and what I urge us to do is always remain critical and never get caught up in black and white thinking. We cannot get caught up in East good, West bad, or this black and white thinking of just because the United States looks like it's not there, that means that the United States is gone in its entirety because as we know throughout history, everywhere there is destabilization, everywhere there is violence, you can see the American footprint is there and you can see the mark of American hegemony will always remain around the globe as long as the American state is still functioning. Firstly, we have to recognize that China is the export capital of the world. China has anywhere from $3 to $4 trillion in export capital. China is a country that produces most of the raw goods and materials for the rest of the world. China will always export more than it imports. This is why China has a trade deficit with every nation on earth. But CJ, we thought that China was socialist. Well, we have to understand as socialists, Marxists, and communists, and all of the other people who are under the umbrella, just because somebody calls themselves socialist or communist, or they have a history of communism within the country or whatever, that does not explicitly mean in the year of 2025 that that place is communist. We can look at China and see that it allows for privatization within its borders. We can look at China and recognize that China participates in exploitative capitalistic systems and structures. We can look at China and we can see that it has a privatized mode of production and private ownership within the borders of the country, which will then make China a capitalist country. Using a historical materialist lens, we can recognize that China has not been on the road to any semblance of socialism in a hot minute. We can understand that since around 1976 to 1978, when Deng Xiaoping took over the country and allowed for a lot more marketization and privatization and the opening up of market reforms and capitalist restoration within China, we can understand that when this happened, this was the end for any type of semblance of China heading towards socialism in the modern day. We can understand that with the eclipsing and with the coming up of people like Jiang Zemin within the CCP, allowing wealthy private business owners within the CPC/CCP, aka the Chinese Communist Party, we can understand that China is largely co-opted by capitalist powers, and capitalist rulers run the mechanisms of the party and run the Chinese state. We can see that this is talked about multiple times from firsthand accounts from people who were within the CCP/CPC, who later withdrew from the party, like Zhang Lushi, who said that the reason why he had to leave the party was because the party was no longer living up to the mission for which it once was conscripted for, which was socialism, and had been overtaken, co-opted, and neutralized by capitalist rulers and powers that be. Now that I have undoubtedly proven that China is capitalist, this leaves the question, so is China imperialist? Which I undoubtedly have to say yes. This is because China's industrial capital has moved across its borders and moved outside of its borders and has now set up industry in a whole different country, which is the DRC. We see that the mining sector within the DRC starts with artisanal miners, who are the people who are literally scraping for the cobalt within these mines and are risking their lives on a daily basis. We see that a lot of artisanal miners are indeed children. After the artisanal mine, the mined cobalt then goes to a negotiator who is more likely a Chinese national, a Westerner, or a Congolese national corporation. After this is when it goes to the industrial mine. Like I said before, China owns 80% of the industrial mining sector within the DRC. And then after this is when it goes to a commercial grade refiner. And like I said before, China owns 75% and is responsible for 75% of the world's refined cobalt. After this then goes to your battery manufacturer, and then this is when it goes to your cell phone, electric vehicle, etc., etc. We see that with Chinese multinational conglomerate corporations like CMOC or China Millennium Limited, we can see that these corporations are responsible for almost 1/3 of the world's global cobalt supply. But hey, CJ, this is the fault of the DRC's government, and this is not the fault of China, right? This is something that I hear from a lot of so-called communists or leftists when it pertains to this situation. And what I need you all to understand is that China has culpability, and China is in fault for multiple reasons. China can say we are not taking any type of cobalt that is coming from exploitative practices and is literally coming from child labor and is coming from enslavement. No one is forcing China to take this cobalt. China is coming in with their capital and is using this capital to further extenuate the circumstances within the DRC. The only reason why China is in this falsified or failed dilemma is because China wants to take part in capitalist imperialist enterprise. End of the story. So y'all can save all of those weak ass excuses that y'all have been making up for the past 2 weeks to defend China's trade with Israel, China's imperialism within Africa, and the war crimes and the crimes against humanity that Xi Jinping and his cronies are committing across the global south. So this leaves us with the question, is CJ a liberal? Fuck no, my nigga. What we have to understand is that I am a principled decolonial Marxist, and as Marx teaches us, we should not hush up to class antagonisms. We should seek to abolish them. We should not hush up to this existing society in which we are in, but we should found a new one. So for all of the Madeline Pendletons or the Khalils out there, y'all can honestly, disrespectfully shut the fuck up. What this conversation and this wider discourse has really just shown who is actually reading the books and reading the text and adhering to the philosophies/paradigms that they claim to adhere to on the internet. But that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. I'll most definitely go further in depth about China's imperialism and what's going on in geopolitics as it pertains to China, Russia, and the United States. But my analyses of these topics are nowhere near done. And like I said, I will go more in depth on these topics in the future. But I hope you all loved and enjoyed this video. My name is CJ, and I'm out. And PS for you hating ass niggas, this is not the end of CJ. This is most definitely just the beginning. It's going to take a lot more than just China discourse to end me. Make sure to subscribe if you're new and drop a like on the video, and make sure to follow my other socials. All of the articles that I use in this video will be linked in the description as well.